It's another day in a world gone mad. I'm Jeff Allen Wolf, and I'm back again to give my commentary on the news. Thank you for joining me. Here we go. Definitely madness happening. U.S. China are holding trade talks. Top level U.S. Treasury Secretary Percent, Commerce Secretary Lutnick, Trade Representative Greer, and Chinese led by Vice Premier He Lifeng delegations met at Lancaster House in London on June 9th to revive the Geneva Truce on tariffs, especially those concerning rare earth mineral controls. Now, the goal is a handshake commitment to ease restrictions. Markets responded with muted optimism. Gold edged up, the dollar softened, and oil rose slightly as investors watch for progress that could improve supply chains and global trade stability. Well, nothing substantial here. And Donald's tariff wars are still in the forefront. Since China is negotiating with an unreliable partner such as Trump, who knows what will come of this and when? Immigration raids spark protests and National Guard deployment in Los Angeles. Let me give you, the listener, a more detailed and fleshed out account of the clashes in LA, including what's happened so far and what could unfold next. The sequence of events, June 6th to June 9th, ICE raids trigger initial clashes. On June 6th, ICE conducted coordinated raids across Los Angeles, including in the Fashion District, a Home Depot, and a clothing warehouse, resulting in the arrest of over 100 individuals, with 44 people detained at the Home Depot scene alone. Now, protests erupted immediately. Clashes between demonstrators and federal agents turned violent, with protesters hurling concrete, rocks, other debris, prompting the use of tear gas, pepper spray, stun grenades, and flashbang grenades by police and ICE. Now, the escalation happened over the weekend. By June 7th, protests expanded to suburbs like Paramount and Compton. Hundreds joined forces in downtown LA, blocking the 101 freeway, lighting vehicles on fire, and vandalizing property, including self-driving Waymo cars. Now, in response, officials labeled the gatherings as unlawful assemblies and employed non-lethal force, including tear gas, smoke canisters, rubber bullets, and flashbangs. At least 44 migrants were arrested for immigration violations since the raids began, with an additional dozens detained during the protests. Then the National Guard deployment and tense show of force took place. On June 7th, President Donald Trump, invoking Title X, ordered up to 2,000 California National Guard troops to LA, a deployment made without Governor Newsom's consent, marking the first such action in 60 years. Initial deployments, around 300 troops, appeared outside federal buildings by June 8th, with Marines placed on high alert at Camp Pendleton in case further action was needed. Troops carried long guns, riot shields, and enforced limited security zones, primarily around federal facilities like the Metropolitan Detention Center. Now, the clashes intensified as forces confronted the protesters. Protesters directly confronted guard members, shouting "shame" while throwing objects at them. In turn, federal law enforcement and the Guard used tear gas, smoke canisters, flashbang grenades, like I said, and rubber bullets. Residents, media crews, and vehicles, even autonomous ones, reported damage or harm in the chaos. Now, over the weekend, at least 56 arrests were reported in LA, including incidents involving Molotov cocktails and one case with a motorcycle ridden into the police lines. Reports also indicate LAPD officers were injured, though not severely. Now, the press was under fire. An Australian TV journalist, Lauren Tomasi, was hit in the leg by a rubber bullet while reporting live. A British photographer was similarly struck. These incidents are fueling serious concerns over press safety and crowd control protocols. Now, there was a state-challenged and political fallout. Governor Gavin Newsom called the deployment illegal and immoral, pledging a legal challenge on the grounds that Title X requires state-level coordination. Mayor Karen Bass and local leaders echoed the criticism, warning that federal overreach could intensify, not quell tensions, and urged peaceful demonstrations. So moving forward, and what should we watch? Legal battle. The California plans to sue immediately. The suit could reach federal court within days. Watch whether a judge orders the withdrawal of the Guard or defines limits on federal deployment powers. The president violated the 10th Amendment in federal law, said a state attorney. Now, the protest trajectory. Future days may see escalating arrests or expanded demonstrations in solidarity cities like San Francisco. Federal and state coordination or lack thereof will greatly influence the situation. The freedom of the press? Well, journalists already got injured. Any additional harm could provoke rulings, federal investigations, or calls from press watchdogs for accountability. Now, the risks from the federal force. The administration has hinted at bringing in active duty Marines, which they did, if unrest expands. This raises constitutional questions and public safety concerns, not to mention the specter of the Insurrection Act, long untapped in modern U.S. history. Look, the whole thing is a clusterfuck. And yes, there were attacks and violence. But to bypass the governor and Donald Trump taking control of the situation is typical of him. Hopefully we thought it would die down, but it didn't. And as I stated, deployment of 700 Marines to Los Angeles was next from Donald Trump. So as of June 9th, approximately 700 Marines from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines have been mobilized into the Los Angeles area. Now, this deployment comes in response to civil unrest and protests triggered by recent ICE immigrations. Now, the purpose of the deployment? Well, Marines were sent to protect federal property and personnel. Their mission supposedly is limited to defense, not active law enforcement. They operate under standard rules of engagement, self-defense, and protection of federal assets. Protests escalated following ICE operations in Los Angeles. President Trump had authorized the 2,000 troops, later added the Marines, like we just stated. Federal buildings and law enforcement offices became protest targets, prompting additional security measures. And as I stated, the political response, Governor Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass announced the deployment as unwarranted and authoritarian. Now, the state of California has filed that lawsuit against the federal government over the deployment. In response, Trump has threatened to arrest Governor Newsom, though no constitutional legal framework currently supports that action. And the legal and constitutional issues, listeners? Well, the Posse Comitatus Act restricts the use of federal troops in civilian law enforcement roles. However, protecting federal property is legally permitted without invoking the Insurrection Act. Federalization of California's National Guard Title X authority without state consent is extremely rare and controversial. Protests have diminished somewhat, but federal authorities are preparing for future unrest. Remember, nationwide protest networks like No Kings are organizing for further action. The situation remains tense, and legal battles are expected to intensify. The conclusion to all of this? The deployment of the Marines to Los Angeles marks a serious federal response to escalating protests. While framed as protective, it has generated significant backlash from California officials and civil rights groups. Legal and constitutional questions around federal authority, military use, protest response are now central to what could become a defining national conflict over state versus federal power in the realm of civil unrest. I don't want to be an alarmist on this, but Donald in charge, and I don't see how this ends well, other than a total shutting down of the protest and some bloodshed happening. I don't see any kumbaya and hakuna matata moments where both sides start dancing in the streets and signaling their undying love for the Trump maniac. And more madness taking place on June 8th. Representative Maxine Waters, Democrat from California, accompanied by Representatives Jimmy Gomez and Norma Torres attempted to enter the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles. They were there to check on detained SEIU California President David Huerta, who was arrested during ICE raids and ongoing immigration protests. Despite identifying herself as a sitting member of Congress, Waters was denied entry. Video footage shows officers at the facility physically shutting the door in her face. Representative Gomez reported that officers used an irritant spray in their direction. DHS claimed that over 1,000 protesters were surrounding the building, though lawmakers reported only about 20 peaceful demonstrators were nearby. The Department of Homeland Security defended its actions by citing safety risks and operational disruption. DHS officials stated that unannounced congressional visits should be scheduled in advance for security reasons. Representative Waters condemned the denial as unconscionable and a violation of congressional oversight powers. Gomez and Torres echoed her concerns, emphasizing the need for transparency and legislative authority to inspect detention centers without giving prior notice. Vice President Kamala Harris later called the denial deeply troubling and indicative of federal overreach. Republican figures largely supported the DHS response, with some mocking Waters' attempt to enter the facility. The ramifications moving forward? Well, congressional oversight. The incident may result in legal challenges to clarify congressional rights to inspect federal detention facilities without prior scheduling. Civil rights concerns. Legal and civil liberties groups argue the denial undermines government transparency and public accountability. Policy shifts. DHS is likely to formalize policies that limit unannounced visits, raising questions about transparency and obstruction of oversight. This incident highlights growing tensions between federal agencies and lawmakers amid intensifying immigration enforcement and civil unrest in California. You know, there's no norm anymore, listeners. Whatever they want, Trump, his supporters will do or take, and nothing stops them. So we are in a daily battle to get back to some kind of regular way of doing things that we've done in this country before Donald Trump took office. Don't hold your breath, everyone. And finally, a news story that's uplifting and inspiring to end this episode on a positive note, thanks courtesy of the Good News Network. A man who visited Mount Everest Base Camp to install a defibrillator, say that 6 times fast, as part of his advocacy work, has revealed the device saved a woman's life just 3 weeks after he left Nepal. Now, David Sullivan is the co-founder of Code Blue CPR, an organization that trains defibrillator use and CPR skills at home and around the world. Earlier this year, the 62-year-old from Surrey ventured to the Himalayas, where he installed it and what he says is the world's highest defibrillator. Climbers die on Everest all the time, not always of cardiac arrest, but certainly sometimes, and the use of this device within the first 3 minutes of a heart attack can improve survival rates from 8% to over 50%, climbing to an altitude of 22,000 feet. To test the device, Sullivan then descended to one of the villages near Everest Base Camp at just under 16,500 feet to install the device for use. He returned from Everest on April 30th and just 3 weeks later learned that it saved a young climber's life after her heart stopped. It was the proudest moment of my life when I learned what had happened, Sullivan told the Southwest News Service. It was last Friday, May 23rd at around 3:45 a.m. I have kids traveling the world, so I additionally thought, oh my God, something's happened. But it was a Sherpa who told me the defibrillator had been activated and had saved a 30-year-old French woman's life. I hope it will help people realize how important it is to have access to these important devices. Sullivan began his advocacy work after he lost 4 close friends, all under the age of 45, to cardiac arrest, and while he was in Nepal, he gave multiple CPR and defibrillator classes to the locals who had never had access to this training before. Now that he's back in the UK, Sullivan is preparing to present a training program to the government which would see 1.2 million children across London trained in CPR. We want every school to have a new defibrillator, and every person in the school, students, teachers, staff, to have all the training necessary to save someone's life, he told SWNS. I performed 9 minutes of CPR for a young lad, used a defibrillator just 3 months after I had been shown how to. While I was doing this, around 30 people just watched and didn't help, as they didn't know how. He remembered when the lad's mom called me the next day to say he was alive. It changed my life forever. Look at the lengths, listeners, that some people will go to, and in this case, the height that some people will go to help people. An active determination and encouraged to make a difference. This is A World Gone Mad. I'm Jeff Allen Wolf. I'll be back again Wednesday. I hope to hear from you. I could use your energy and input, emails, texts, phone messages. Otherwise, I'm sitting in a room talking to myself. Stay hopeful.